So Stu, what's your secret, man? We were just talking about Brian Johnson, right? The guy that's trying to live forever. He's taking all these supplements. I know you're friends with Paul Saladino, and he had a few things to say on that.
Oh,
Like
exactly right.
You're
Exactly
53,
right.
mate, right? You're in incredible shape. You're pretty much shredded, let's be honest, right, as a byproduct. But metabolically, you're healthy. Like, what's your secret, man? What's your thoughts on all this longevity and metabolic health?
Well, my secret is I certainly don't want to live forever. My secret is do boring things and consistently, and it's kind of the window. In terms of Brian Johnson, who we were speaking about before, and I don't know whether you've watched his documentary online. Have you watched
I watched a little snippet of it, and it was too painful to watch anymore.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we were having a conversation offline about there are so many things that you can do, and we're influenced by everything that we see on social media in terms of morning routines that then go into, what I eat in a day to how I get to sleep and all that kind of stuff that start at 3 a.m. with gratitude and journaling and meditation and whatever that may be, which is great for the 1% of people who perhaps make a living out of documenting this online. But for 99.9% of us who have kids and a life, none of that works. Like, it doesn't work. My secret is just do boring things consistently. Lift heavy things slowly, every day or as much as you can. Walk as best you can. Knock the booze on the head. Like, it's boring, but you feel better for it. Get some sunshine, try and be happy, and just press play every single day on those things. Think about, I'm 53 now, and I think about my grandparents that lived till their 90s, and now we're not living into our 90s. And we've got much more information. We've got way better access to resources and medication and whatever we need to try and get us there. But ultimately, I just think all this stuff puts our head in a spin. Work on sleep instead of all of these kind of minutiae. I can't meditate very well, and I've got to try and force meditate every single day. I just go for a walk. Go for a walk for half an hour, like, if you can.
100%. It's so simple, isn't it? And the thing is, we get bombarded, don't we, with all these things in terms of get up super early, get up at 4 a.m., do your 2-hour morning routine, and then you got to do your cold showers, your ice baths, and then you got to fast till 2 p.m. And I just literally did an episode on this because it was clear that my audience needed it. And there's so much confusion when it comes to if we just go with nutrition, forget about all the other stuff, right? With nutrition, there's so much confusion and so much conflicting information out there. 1 minute someone will say, right, just eat carnivore. The next minute someone saying, obviously, plants are trying to kill you or whatever. The next minute it's like, no, you need to eat all of these vegetables because otherwise, you're going to get cancer. But if you eat red meat, it's going to give you stomach cancer. Yeah. But then the vegetables you need because of the micronutrients. But then before you know it, people are just, eating thin air. You know what I mean? They're getting really confused.
Don't eat thin air because it's going to be polluted and that's going to kill you as well. Like, where does it stop? Follow the money on all of those things. There'll always be a voice or a vested interest sitting behind all of those trains of thought, irrespective of what diet it is, what modality, what recovery or training principle or practice. There's always going to be somebody pushing that to make cash.
Definitely. There's always financial benefit in the background, and that's why things like fasting, right? Let's talk on that, because I know we touched on that before. And when it comes to fasting, for example, for me, I tend to break my fast about midday-ish unless I have some 100% dark chocolate before that. I have 2 big meals. It works for me. Like I said to you last time, I know that I need to do, like, not need to, but I probably would benefit from throwing a curveball just for my overall health, up in cortisol levels, but and also just in terms of probably even testosterone levels, maybe even building muscle a little bit, having protein a bit closer to training, those kind of things, having 3 meals a day. But I do this because it's like convenient, I can get more work done, etc. When it comes to fasting, a lot of people do this and they do prolonged fasts. Now, in my opinion, most people have no place fasting because the majority of people, they're either on or off with their diets. They can't stick to an approach or adhere to a way of eating for long enough before they kind of fall off and they go back to old behaviors, because obviously ultra-processed foods, and it might be alcohol as well, they've kind of hijacked our brain a bit, right? So people always struggle with that, and then it's adding an extra, it's almost adding fuel to the fire. Most people are stressed day to day, they're not getting enough sleep, and then fasting is actually an added stress. So I think that's like a tool in the box that people can use once they built a really healthy relationship with food, and they've got to a good level. It's kind of a tool at the end of the line. Like, I can count on one hand how many clients I actually tell them to, skip meals or fast. Not even that really. It's not even an approach that I use really. So what's your thoughts on fasting? I know you don't fast anymore. I'd love to know your experience on that and what you think in terms of most people with fasting and stuff.
Well, I think it depends why you want to do it. Like, where are you at any given time? Like, are you carrying too much weight? Well, maybe you should start looking at the quality of the foods that you eat first before you then start to think about fasting. And think about the analogy of a car. If the engine doesn't work, don't replace the wiper blades, right? Let's go straight to the thing that is the issue. Like, if I'm carrying too much weight, well, why is that? Well, what am I eating? What am I doing every single day? Am I getting up in the morning and am I having toast, bagels, and a Starbucks coffee? I mean, ultimately, everything comes down to the quality of the food that we eat. And I think if we can just make a shift to increase the quality of the food that we eat, which would naturally push us into whole foods, right? Because it's kind of hard to get into a pickle with whole foods because they're not engineered to be hyperpalatable. They haven't been engineered to give us that bliss point and this uncontrollable urge not to stop and wanting to eat and hijacking our hunger signals and our satiety signals and all that kind of stuff. Food's just food. And it could be as boring as anything. Like, I interviewed a guy who was morbidly obese and decided that he was going to eat nothing but potatoes for 1 year. Like, nothing but potatoes, only potatoes. And he had to get creative with the way that he cooked potatoes because he thought he was going to go mad. But ultimately, he lost weight. He didn't have to fast. I mean, that's a ridiculous extreme.
No, but that's a prime example, though, right?
Yeah.
If you bake a bunch of potatoes and you can add salt to it, crack on. Versus some deep fried chips, for example.
That's it.
I mean, you can't overeat. It's like you said last time. You were talking about, I think you said like an orange or something, right? Try and eat 5 oranges. It's like try and eat 5 baked potatoes. Way more challenging than just smashing through bowl upon bowl of deep fried potato chips, as they call them in America.
100%. And my daughter came home yesterday, 16-year-old daughter, and she had a bag of dried apricots. And she said, look, I got some dried apricots. It's going to be a healthy snack. And I said, turn the bag around, have a look at the sugar, like per serve. It was like 40 grams. And I said, well, essentially what you've done is you've taken all the goodness and there's water in there and there's a lot of fiber and you've just condensed that thing. It's been air dried. And now you've just got a bag of sugar, essentially. And you might, per serve, I think it was like you'd have 8 pieces per serve. Well, you're not going to eat 8 pieces of fruit in one go because it's impossible because you can't do it because your body says, hold on a minute, that's too much. That's like, no more, stop. But of course we've engineered these foods to be hyperpalatable and now we can do things that we couldn't ordinarily do previously where we can access massive amounts of food in very convenient portions that are unfortunately inconvenient for our health because they just deliver the wrong macros. Everything comes back just to eating real food. And I often tell a lot of friends who are struggling with any aspect of their diet to just avoid everything with vegetable oil in it because ultimately that will be lots of processed and packaged food which will be engineered to sell food. And that will get you on track to eating whole foods. And therein lies the solution to the majority of people's problems. Just gravitate to whole foods.
100%. And I'm glad you touched on something then going back to fasting, about fasting for weight loss.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about that specifically. And I always talk about this, about most people who are looking, even if it's not someone who's really overweight, someone who's just looking to lose that last bit of fat I've had clients where they've been stuck on the same, like gaining and losing the same 5 pounds, for example, or 10 pounds for years. And then they try and go to fasting in terms of restricting food. It's taking food away again, rather than, okay, let's add in more of these good quality foods that I'm missing out on.
100%.
And then they, and it annoys me. I actually read a book. I like the book, The Circadian Code, but I actually hated most of the part there when they were talking about fasting and time restricted eating. And they use it irritates me when they use 12-week studies. So this person lost 40 pounds in 12 weeks. Great. Yeah, well, do you know, actually most people, 90% of people gain it all back within a year or two. That does not matter. Not losing weight is actually not the issue, Stu. It's keeping it off, right?
I think fasting is an excellent strategy if you want to hijack your metabolism for the worst, right?
That's right. Yeah. I think that's what I'm saying now. I feel like I feel my metabolism kick up. If I have an extra meal now, I can feel my metabolism pick up. It's almost like as a side effect, I look a little bit better. You know what I mean?
And like, I mean, ultimately, it's feast or fasting, right? And I look at it from a standpoint of the body says, oh, like we're in trouble. There's no food coming in. Slow everything down. Let's shut down some systems. And any food that comes in, let's hold on to that as best we can. Let's shuttle that into fat reserves because we're going to need to use that fuel later on. Like slow everything down. You start to feel tired. You haven't got a lot of energy. Metabolism is slow. And then when you do finally access that meal at whatever time you decide to eat, the body's going to tend to those calories in a very different way because you've just come out of a period of famine. So I don't fast. Doesn't work for me. I'm lean anyway, but from an energy standpoint, it made me feel like crap. I got so lean that I looked ill. But for me, I think from a fasting perspective, like I'll just have my dinner in the evening, really no later than 5:30, and that gives me about 11 hours till my next meal. That's good enough. That's good enough for, digestion to occur and quality sleep to kick in and whatever needs to happen during those phases of sleep. And I wake up hungry and I have a huge, huge, huge meal for breakfast. And then I can go and just tackle my day, 3 meals a day, no need to snack, all of that stuff that I know people get really caught up on because they're in a bit of a spiral with processed foods and maybe the wrong sorts of foods when they wake up, or they don't even have breakfast at all. So I don't know. From a fasting perspective, I haven't found a lot of people or spoken to a lot of people that have truly benefited from in the long term. Yeah, it might work because you lose a little bit of water weight. But ultimately, when they start to eat again, like eat properly again, the weight piles back on.
And that's why I always say to people, the reason why I do it is, again, I probably could benefit. It's kind of splitting hairs where I'm at because I'm doing okay health-wise, right? But I know for fine-tuning, it's good to throw a curveball. It's like you're training, right, Stu?
Yeah.
You're never going to do the same training. What you did, stupidly, did the gym and volume for 2 years. How the hell do you manage that? 2 months, not 2 years.
Yeah.
How the hell do you manage that, mate? You deserve a medal for that, like I said last time.
Diligence.
But throwing a curveball, right? That's why you need to look at it similar in a sense to training. Throwing a curveball, it's good to do that, right? Your body is going to adapt to what you're doing. The body's an adaptation machine. Yeah. But going back to fasting, people really, when it comes to performance, the reason I do it is because I know I can get more work done. I generally feel good in the fast. It's not even like fasted really. It's not like a long fast. It's probably about 16 hours, maybe a bit longer than you do, which for most people is too much because most people don't realize, because I've coached so many people, everyone is more stimulating than ever. Like we've never had to adapt this level of to this level of screen time within itself, right, Stu? How long people spend on the screen. Let me tell you, the biggest challenge I have with people I take on is having a bedtime routine. People are glued to their screens. If I can get people, Stu, to get away from their phone, and this is like successful people as well, who are actually crushing it, a lot of them, but they're on their phone and they're working till late, right? And I say to them, right, let's give it 30 minutes. I found if I try and get people to give it 60 minutes, no screens, it's normally a bit too much to ask. So even to get people 30 minutes to put their phone away. Now that's cortisol. You look at that screen, that's stress hormones.
Yeah.
All day long, people are working longer hours than ever because you've got your email on your phone, right, within itself. So you can just constantly check emails. Man, there's so much. Like everyone's bathtub is basically overflowing and people don't even realize it. When I take people on, I'm like, day-to-day people, we're not talking about pro athletes. We've got one stress bucket and everything goes in there. You've got family, you've got work stress, you've got training, then you add fasting on. Do you see what I mean? There's very little room for error for a lot of people. So I feel like it's adding fuel to the fire for most.
Throw in an ice bath to that just to tip off your cortisol level.
That's why I stopped doing them, my man. And that's me, right? I stopped doing them because we're super meticulous, right? We're tracking. I was like, I got to stop them. Hey, I've been back on the saunas as well since the last conversation we had. 3 a week. Brilliant. Straight on it, my man. Straight on it.
Good. That's good. Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm with you with the social media stuff. I think the problem with social media is, yes, screen is an issue. And you can negate a lot of that with blocking devices like glasses and night shift, things like that. But it's the stimulation. And ultimately, we've got to try and switch off that stimulation to try and get into that sleep rhythm. I actually use Netflix as a tool. And I heard it on a Tim Ferriss podcast years ago, and he was talking about this process of visual overwriting, which was essentially you've got this monkey kind of whirring around in your brain, thinking about all the crap that doesn't really matter that you just can't drop. You need to overwrite that with something else. So I actually use trash TV as a method just to switch myself off for an hour before bed. And I'll be sitting there with my blue light blockers on and just watching some trash show. And it works. It works because it's just, it's pure enjoyment. It's entertainment. There's nothing really to think about. And I'm not into, Facebook. Oh, somebody said something about me here. And then that starts the mind going again. And
that's a really interesting point, actually. I had a neuroscientist on, actually, and he was saying about, cognitive stimulation.
Yeah.
And that looks different for everyone. Now, most people, they're going to do better with just no screens. Now, the TV is actually not the same. It's nowhere near as bad in terms of the blue light that it emits, like your laptop and your phone. Yeah. And it's work. Again, it's stress, right? It's cognitive stimulation. Ideally, you've probably heard of the 3-2-1 method, right? I had Stephen Cabral on. Very simple. 3 hours no food, 2 hours no water, and 1 hour no screens.
Yes.
But even 2 hours, I found I need to give it, like yesterday, for example, I was doing some work. I like to be asleep by 10 p.m.
Yeah.
It got to like 8:15 and I wanted to do some paid ads, right? And I put it off all day. And I was like doing it, and then I felt the stress building up. Yeah. I thought, if you do this, you're crossing the line, and tomorrow you're going to pay for it. So I just stopped, writ down what I had to do the next day, and cut it off 90 minutes before. But they even say ideally 2 hours before bed now, no work, because that's a lot of stress. It takes you a while to switch off. So it's, for some people, even scrolling or looking at the screen, it might drop the cognitive stimulation, right? And that's what matters the most. Like for me, I'm reading the book now where it's kind of stimulating my mind a bit. It's actually The Wolf of Wall Street. You know that film?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh man, it's such, what's that?
Is it a good book?
Oh, it's great, man. It's just like I watched the film and I loved it. I thought it was hilarious, man. Yeah. And the book goes into even more detail, but it's like a roller coaster, right? So it's kind of stimulated me a little bit. So that's what you got to be aware of, cognitive stimulation. But I wanted to go into, just to backtrack a little bit, your experience, right, Stu, in terms of, like, I'd like to go back a bit deeper. Let's talk about, right, you came to Australia. How long ago was you came from Australia, from the UK? 2002. So this is like 23 years ago, right? You come to Oz. Tell us just, I guess, in short, where you were at then with your health and mindset. Fast forward to how you got into just being absolutely like in the sure. How do you say it? You're like literally you're connecting with all the best experts in the world on health. You started a podcast a long time ago before most people even knew what a podcast was. And then you started Ancestral Nutrition. Just give us a little bit of a insight.
Yeah, well, look, I've always been super active. Like I'm mountain biking, whatever it is. Like I just love to move. And so I came over from the UK to Australia during that time, and I was eating the standard Australian diet, same as everybody else. Never really a heavy drinker, but always, active, consumed a lot of food. Used to eat the muesli bars and because they were healthy, and the healthy granola and stuff like that. And then I met a friend of mine. I joined the surf club in Coogee, met a friend of mine, and we had this idea of creating a healthy protein powder because there was nothing at the time, and I was training with him in the gym, and we were buying all the crap from the stores, and so we created a whole food alternative to protein powders. So it was mixed nuts, seeds, crushed and ground with some whey protein isolate, things like that. That took off. The company was called 180 Nutrition. It grew very, very quickly. He was a personal trainer, worked at the UTS in Sydney, was struggling with his clients when they were wanting to lose weight, and he was giving them the stock standard advice of eat less, move more. Wasn't working. So because we'd had some momentum with the business, we decided to start a podcast. It's called The Health Sessions. We wanted to connect with health and wellness leaders around the globe and try and figure out whether what we were being told to do by the powers that be was actually the right thing to do. And that led us to our first podcast with a lady called Nora Gagaudis. So she was like the grandmother of ancestral living. I read her book called Primal Body, Primal Mind, and that was the point that everything changed. I just realized that there was a whole world out there that I'd never even contemplated could be impacting my health. And so she started to talk about things like gluten, low carbohydrate, high fats, high animal fats, and all of these areas that just then spiraled into interview after interview after interview, and that just pushed us out to trial over the next decade plant-based diets, vegetarian, Mediterranean, healthy fats, low fat, high carb, low carb, all of those things that that then ultimately led that business to move on. And then I moved into ancestral nutrition, so co-founded that because I was really interested in nutrient density and access to organ meats that offered massive amounts of nutrition that we weren't currently getting. Still record the podcast today. Have tried all of the diets and tested everything under the sun in terms of DNA, microbiome, heavy metals, all manner of bloods and cholesterol, VO2 max, all of that kind of stuff that essentially just has now put me in a position to realize that, well, we've just got to really revert back to what our grandparents were doing, which was essentially just eat simple foods, move as much as we can, and just try and get back to nature, which, as you mentioned, is not sitting on your phone and trying to get to sleep, all of those things. And we just repeat that as best we can. And everything seems to start to then track in the right direction.
It's so interesting you say that, right? Because I was just thinking about that, I've got the 8 sleep, right? I know you haven't got that yet. I think you used to use the chili pad and stuff, if I've got that right, yeah, for your bed?
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to have that. Then I upgraded to the 8 sleep. And I was just thinking the other day, it's interesting, right? How I've spent, $4,000 on this 8 sleep thing. I'm paying for the extra bloody AI technology as well. So it automatically adapts. It's called I should be affiliated with these. I mentioned them too many times now. But anyway, I think I forgot what it's called now. It's the automatic system that they have anyway, where it basically regulates based on your body temperature. For example, like last night, it made 30 adjustments based on the temperature of my body. So it went from like minus, I think the average is about -2 is the perfect temperature for me. Yeah. Incredible technology. But I was just thinking, and we've got the blue light, which is we never evolved with blue light. We would have essentially red light. We would be awake. And then it would get dark, the sun would set, then we would probably go and hide in caves so we don't get eaten. Then we would come back out, or we would sit around the fire. Obviously, we'd have a fire. And then we would go to sleep, and then we would come back out when it's light and it's safe, and the sun would rise, and everything was just natural, circadian rhythm, and then even the foods, we would hunt. So I just thought all the things, we have to try so hard in this day and age to fight against everything that's going against us, technology. And then you bring AI into the mix as well. People are moving less and less and less and less, and they're actually being taken away more and more and more from the real world. And also we've got the ultra processed foods, which hijack our brain. And then not to mention non-stop stimulation with blue light, which is going to disrupt the most important thing, which is sleep and circadian rhythm, right? So if people just look at it like all the external factors are working against us. So the way I would look at it is, if you're doing what most people around, and this is not to look down on people, but if you want to be healthy and you really want to be metabolically healthy and you want to live longer, and not only that, you want to add life to your years, like Stu said, it's not about living forever, it's about actually living a good quality life, then you've actually got to be the weird one almost now in your group, right?
Yeah, you have to be the outlier.
We're very much like weird people. To most people, they will look at us and we're very odd the way we live,
Yeah, people call me the health nut. But ultimately,
that's an understatement, Stu. That is.
Yeah, I know it is. It really is. But it again, it's like follow the money. Like, what do we need to do to sleep? We need all these gadgets. We need to track all this stuff. We need all the right sleep supplements, and maybe even we need to wear earphones and eye mask and all this kind of crazy stuff. Ultimately, if you increase your steps during the day, you will sleep better. Like if you eat a good meal and you give yourself a good 3 hours for that food to digest before you get into bed, you will sleep better. It's that simple. Like, we just need to get back to basics. And I just think we are losing the plot because as I mentioned before, like my grandparents lived until their 90s and they lived simple lives, and they weren't without stress because they went through World War and depression and food rationing and all of the things today that we've forgotten about. And we think, we've got our own stresses. The internet doesn't work. Oh my God, like, what are we going to do? But ultimately, it just get back to basics, move more, get sunlight in your eyes, get away from those screens 24/7, eat a little bit earlier, have conversations, real conversations. And by the time it's, bedtime finally creeps upon us, you will feel tired and you'll sleep better. I mean, I track my sleep with an Oura Ring and have done for 5 years because I'm a bit of a health nut, but I just like to find out what are the levers for me that really impact my sleep. And I know that if I am on my laptop actually working past 7 p.m., forget it. It's going to take me forever to get to sleep. Whereas ordinarily I can be asleep within 5 minutes. But it's just really downtime. We used to have a lot of downtime, and now we don't have a lot of downtime. We used to daydream, now we don't daydream. We look at our phones, and our phones will fill up every skerrick of free time that we possibly have, and then we look at the clock, and boy, we've been on that phone for an hour. Like, what could we have done in that hour? Could have gone for a walk, could have done so many things, but really it's just
100%.
A couple of years ago I decided that I wanted to track 20,000 steps a day for a year, and to see what happens. And yes, it made a big shift in a lot of health metrics, but the biggest thing that it did, that came about that for me, that I still use today, is that when I go for a walk, I leave the phone at home, because that allows me to think, as opposed to listening to a podcast, listening to music, or chatting to somebody on the phone. Just having that time in our own heads, just in nature, is a game changer. Like, it really is. And I see so many people now, maybe they'll be out at a restaurant enjoying a good meal and they're on their mobile phones. Like, I would suggest try leaving that phone at home. If you're going to go out, leave your phone at home. Like, you don't need it. Like, you really don't. If you're going to go for a walk, leave the phone at home, and see what that does to your mindset, because it will actually allow you. I had answers to questions that I'd been pondering for a long time, and that figured itself out because I was thinking about things as I was out in nature. It was really profound.
Hey man, it's called Mind Wandering as well. A great book. It's called Stolen Focus with Johan Hari. Have you read it?
No, but I've heard of it.
Sorry, man, I lost you a bit then. Are you still there?
I am still here, yes. Yeah, I've definitely heard of the book, but I haven't read it.
No, good. Yes, exactly what he talks about is what you said then. It's called Mind Wandering. So this guy, he went away for like 3 to 6 months without his phone, I believe. And just like completely changed his life, right? Of course, all the problems he had, he solved them all. Creativity, wrote a book, like just from not having the phone. Yeah. And it's a thing that it's actually a term now. I think they've done research on it. What you're talking about there is mind wandering. So I've started doing that more myself. I definitely need to do it more often. And I particularly make a practice of it when I go with my girlfriend to, like, remember Centennial Park? And they used to live here.
Yes. Yeah, great. Love it.
We'll go there, and every time I go there, I leave the phone at home, and I'm just in nature. And again, it helps me solve problems. I feel so much calmer without it, and it's a game changer. But just quickly on that as well, before I forget, for the audience, I've got my nutrition fundamentals guide, which I'm giving away. So just go down to the show notes, and basically it gives you all the clarity you need in terms of a shopping list, meal plan, calorie calculator, everything's in there basically. So it cuts through all the BS. You can get that for free. Just click the link below. And I've actually tied in my sleep tracker that I use for clients as well, speaking of sleep. So click that link, you get my nutrition and sleep blueprint. And also I'm doing the mid-year reset webinar. That's next Wednesday, the 16th of July at 9 a.m. Sydney time. So that's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern time. On the 15th, Tuesday the 15th in America. So both of the links are in the show notes before I forget. So yeah, man, I want to touch on that as well. Before we get into I want to get into some myths. I want to get into microplastics and stuff as well, which you've taught me a lot about. Environment is everything, man, right? Social influence. You mentioned your daughters then. I'm glad because I forgot to ask you about this. So I know you've got 3 daughters. You've got 2 twins, right? And you've got the eldest daughter who is now, how old's the eldest daughter? Is she?
She's 20 now.
16. How old, sorry?
Yeah, so 20, and she's at uni.
20, yeah, 20, and the twins are 16, right?
Yes, correct.
Got it, man. How do you find that? Because I know a lot of people listening, they're going to be parents, and obviously, the goal is to be a parent. If all goes to plan next year at some point, if all goes to plan, if my swimmers are strong enough, Stu, you know what I mean? Let's put them to the test.
Be careful what you wish for, mate. You might have twins.
Exactly. YouTube will probably, block that off now, right, with these new laws they put in place. But anyway, how do you manage that in terms of because when they're young as well, I guess you were nowhere near, well, actually, you wouldn't have been far off, but what you know now and how you live and the education you have now is going to be a lot more evolved in comparison to when your daughters were younger. How did you manage that from when they were young age and where they're at now in terms of the way they eat, the way you communicate? Because ultimately, your actions are going to lead the way the most anyway, the way you live and act, right?
Yeah,
Which is a win.
exactly right. And you've literally answered it for me. It's just lead by example. So in terms of the food that we have, I mean, we cook every meal. We don't, nothing is heated. Like there's no packaged food or any of that kind of stuff. It's all whole foods, fresh foods. It's all we have in the house. No sodas or things like that. I mean, for treats, we'll have, Soda Stream, which is basically carbonated water with fresh lemon, things like that. Ultimately, it is just leading by example. Do everything that all of the girls go to the gym and they enjoy walking and out in nature and doing all that kind of stuff. I've given them enough information. They now know that they can't forget what I've told them. They can choose to ignore it. That's fine. It's on their own path. That they've got a lot of answers in terms of, weight and skin and mood and sleep. Like they know what they need to do to try and fix any of these areas, but it's on them if they want to put that into practice. So I'm not going to enforce that. And it's worked out pretty well. I mean, they've got good health. They're energetic. They don't spend too much time on social. I mean, I'm not going to ban devices, but we have a few guardrails on in terms of screen time. And they understand that we don't use devices past 7 o'clock in the evening because it's going to ruin everything. And ultimately, it's really just here is my knowledge. You can see what we've been doing as a family for the last 20 years. You have the answers now if you want to access them, but you are very much on your own because I want to foster independence. Like I want these kids to think for themselves, and it's very, very hard for them now, given the fact that they've been raised in a tech world, and now we're about to go to the next level with AI, which is going to really kind of dominate a lot of thinking now, hijacker thinking because it can think for us. It's going to, I don't know where it's going to go from this point forward. Not hugely optimistic, I think, I would say, just with all of the careers that are going to disappear because of AI's integration into displacing a lot of these advertising, accountants, coding, whatever that may be, how that's going to work, law, it just goes on and on and on. But ultimately for me, it's just like, well, we're just going to live the way that we think is the best way for optimal health. We're going to have a few road bumps along the way. We'll learn, we'll figure it out as we go, but we're doing okay.
That's awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah, sorry, it freezes a little bit here and there, but I'm sure it's recording fine, but I don't know what it is there, but that's all right. It's all good. I'm sorry if I interrupted you anyway, but I'm going to crack on now in case it freezes again. But no, I appreciate you clearing that up. And just for anyone else, right, who's parents, I know I can only imagine, right, how hard it is being a parent, and you're never going to be. It must be impossible to be, the perfect parent. But all you can do is your best. However, I know when I have kids, I am just going to lead by example, and I hate the excuses, particularly for men that I coach, where it's women as well, right? But I coach mainly men now, and they have kids, and then they use that as an excuse because I haven't got time to take care of myself, and that blows my mind because I'm like, hold on a minute.
Yeah,
I appreciate you might be getting less sleep when you got a young baby, man. I can't really relate to that because I haven't experienced it. That's the part that's going to destroy me, by the way. There's Oura-rings coming off, right? When I have a kid, put it that way, that's going to destroy me that first year.
Yeah. It takes a lot of getting used to, but it'll work out like it always does.
Exactly, man. Just weather that storm, I'll be fine. But anyway, with guys, I get it. You're not getting as much sleep. You work a lot. Your time's limited because you got a baby to look after. Blah blah blah. But bottom line is, my personal standards, if anything, are going to be even higher when I have kids because I'm going to be even more on the ball, and not to the point where it's extreme or anything like that, but I'm going to be like, right, these kids are watching my every move pretty much, right? Because they're a lot smarter, I think, than we give them credit for in terms of what they observe. And I want to, so if I've had a rubbish sleep, let's say I have 3 hours sleep one night, right? My baby's kept me up all night. Okay, I'm not going to be going to break any records in the gym or even go into the gym, but I'll probably get the bands out and do some body weight stuff, 10, 15 minutes just to get a little pump on, send that strength signal, boost my energy. I'm still going to make good choices with food for the most part. Exactly. That's the number one thing I'm going to do. I'm going to go for a walk. So I want to hammer that message home. Like, your personal standards need to be even higher when you have kids, because you're going to lead by example. Again, it's not about being perfect, but it's about, right, I need to be as healthy as I can for my offspring, right? So going the other way, it just, it doesn't make sense for me. As much as I've got compassion for how busy it is and how stressful it must be, having kids, especially young kids,
Yeah, exactly right. And you know what? You can always, oftentimes you find that you make an hour perhaps for some gym time for yourself where you can get your head back in line because of all the craziness that happens at home with this new person. And so that's even more of a reason and a purpose to make sure that you do just take that single hour out of every day just for yourself. And then, just as you mentioned before, work all of the incidental stuff into the day. Like, yes, you're going to have to go for a walk with a baby. Well, that's fine. Well, just make sure you get out in nature and just move, do what you need to do. And it's very much a learning process. And we had a few rules. One of the main ones that I didn't want to do, I didn't want to raise a kid on an iPad or an iPhone. Like, I didn't want to give them the iPad, and when they were screaming, it's like, oh, here you go, have the iPad. One of the things that we also did was we were really noisy at home because we have quite a social household. And so when we had friends over, we had dinner parties, and ordinarily people go, oh, you've got babies in the other room, I'm going to have to be quiet. And it was like, no, you be as loud as you want. We'll turn up that music, because you're creating the future that you want. And I don't want a future where I can't speak after 7 p.m. because the baby's in bed. Like, they have to get used to us. And it worked out really well that way. And they slept through the night at 6 weeks. And so we were kind of back on track reasonably quickly.
Wow, that's good going, man.
Yeah.
So, appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's important for the audience to understand that it's not about being perfect, but it really is by leading by example, and essentially just being the best you can be. And I think from a young age, kids are so vulnerable as well. It's like that first kind of 5 or 6 years. Like, I got a friend with a kid, and he's, I guess he's, really healthy, eats well for the most part. And, his kid just, fruit is a treat for him, even from a young age. He's only, I believe he's only 4 or 5. I think he's just turned 5 actually now. And fruit for him is like overpowering sugar. He loves it. Yeah. He eats his beef. He even likes his vegetables. You know what I mean? Like, they just kind of programmed him from a young age to really enjoy those foods. And I think then the next challenge then, obviously, as he gets older, is being exposed to like parties and kids. And I think I heard someone else say as well, his kid will go to a party or whatever, and, they eat well most of the time because they've always got healthy food available. I heard that's another really important thing, which I'm going to do my best to implement, is having that food available to eat all the time. So like, if they go into the snack drawer, there's healthy food there. There might be some fruit, some vegetables, some, protein sources or whatever for them to snack. So they're used to pick. So even if they do want a snack, they've got, so they're programmed that way rather than the ultra processed foods,
I used to, before the kids used to go to the parties where it is like, it's just game on with junk food. I used to make them the fattiest omelette I possibly could. This would be like a 6-egg omelette cooked in butter and milk and coconut cream, and we whip all that together. And I'd say, you can just eat that before you go, and everything's good. They are so full.
I can imagine you with an evil look in your eye, whipping the eggs like, yeah, I'm gonna load these up now. They're not gonna be hungry for 7 hours.
They was like, oh, how's the party? And I said, what did you eat? And I said, oh, not much. I wasn't really hungry.
And you're like, yes, you're trying to play it down, but in your head, you're like, yes, results.
That's a win. That's a win.
Hey, that's smart, man. I love that. That's a really good point. Let's get into, I want to kind of finish off on some myths, some facts, and some of your opinions on the following, really, right? So let's start off with like vegetables and stuff. Now, we've had our own journey. We've already talked about this, but I switched over to like animal-based eating, thanks to you. I was already on the fence because certain plants were irritating my gut, blah, blah, blah. So obviously anti-nutrients, I think there's gluten, there's lectins, there is phytates,
oxalates.
and there's one more. Yeah. And there's one more, which I forgot, oxalates. And but a lot of people are very, particularly people who found my podcast, are very much over to the animal-based side or the carnivore side, a lot of them. And a lot of people are very fearful of vegetables. And I don't think that's a good message personally to get out there, to get people scared of vegetables at all. But I do think it's really important to be aware of how these things, how the plants affect gut health, immune system, and stuff like that. So what do you think about that, man, in terms of vegetables?
I think yeah, look, I think, I mean, we have heard the term everything in moderation. I believe that, I mean, the gut obviously helps us to digest and process and utilize the nutrients of foods that we eat. If we decide that we're going to cut out an entire food group, well, then your gut flora is going to change over time. And then when you do go back to introduce, let's say you've cut out bread, like all bread and grains, and you've done that for a year. Well, when you come back to eat that slice of bread, you're going to react to that and you're going to think, oh, I'm allergic or sensitive and I've got, gluten, or I could be celiac. I think that is just a reaction from what's happening inside your gut. And I spoke to a food biologist a while back, years ago, who said she thought it was a really good idea just to keep these foods in our diet, but in very small portions, just to foster the diversity of the gut microbiome. And I get that you might react to certain foods. Oftentimes we kind of go gung-ho into like the green smoothie era, right? I'm going to have nothing but green smoothies or celery juice for, morning, lunch and dinner. I just think there's such volume in that. And yes, like you blend up raw kale, like kilos and kilos and kilos of kale, that oxalates that are present in things like kale, they're going to be more of an issue for you when you're eating kilos a day, and that's all you're eating. So the odd piece of kale in a salad, I don't think is a big deal at all, and you're probably going to benefit from all of the other things that outweigh the oxalates. Or if you're really concerned, just cook it. Like, don't consume raw, because it's very fibrous as well. And we've got to remember that all these fruits and veggies, like, they are a great source of fiber, and there is only so much fiber that we can take before we start to feel really uncomfortable. So I would say that I think in most parts the merits outweigh perhaps any of the issues that we might be concerned about. But we just need to, keep that kind of everything in moderation. And I don't mean let's smoke cigarettes in moderation, but when we're talking about things like fruits and veg, pick the ones that you're more comfortable with, and just make sure that you mix things up like you're training, right? If you're going to do bench press every day, 5 days a week, you're going to probably have a disproportionate chest to the rest of your body. If you're going to eat kale smoothies, or you're only going to eat these huge vegetable bowls of the same veg every single day, then that's going to have an impact in some way, shape and form as well. I guess just mix it up. But variety is important. And we know that gut health is super important as well. And I know that microbiome diversity plays into a really important role into gut health. And the more we restrict our diets, the less diverse our microbiome is going to be. So I look at that as a negative as well. So try and mix it up, I say.
Yeah, 100%. No, I like that. And I just noticed with clients who have success with results and just with how they feel as well, they tend to eat vegetables, but they don't go crazy, like you say. What you've got to look at with vegetables is it's as long as you, and I always say to clients, again, there's so much variance from person to person, but how do you feel an hour after? Do you have any gut issues? Did you have any immune responses? You have to pay attention to those things. But for the most part, vegetables are high volume. They're low in calories. They're high in fiber. Now, fibers, again, it's a debatable thing in terms of fiber. Is fiber good or bad? Again, the answer is always it depends. There's so much nuance from person to person. But cut a long story short, you're going to eat less. You're going to be more satiated on top of the protein. And then, starchy carbohydrates. We mentioned potatoes, sweet potatoes, or even white potatoes, a good source of energy. You're going to get potassium, etc. So all in all, like Stu said, I think being the average person, you do not need to worry about vegetables at all. It's going to be way better than the other crap that most people are eating. So I think it's ridiculous when people worry about that. When you look at, okay, you may have struggled with your weight for a long time, losing weight, gaining the back. And I get it. It's really hard. but that's not going to be because of vegetables. I don't know anyone who's, like you said earlier, going back to what we said, I ate too many carrots, for example, and I gained a bunch of weight, right? It just doesn't happen. We got to be realistic about real food. I was stuck. I got on the scales, and I was 10 kilos up. It was those bananas and carrots. I knew it. You know what I'm saying? It's just, it don't work like that.
Don't blame the apples for what the Oreos did, right? It's not, fruit and vegetables are not the problem. And
100%.
yes, I mean, they make sure you wash them if you're not buying organic. Like who in their right mind can afford to eat organic vegetables all the time? Like, forget it. I got 3 kids. Like, I can't do it. I just think looking at that side of things, it's like worrying, like we mentioned before, about the windscreen wipers when the engine on the car doesn't work. You've got bigger problems.
Well, that's a really good point. So let's touch on that, organic versus non-organic, right? So for me, lately, I used to be super extreme, right? So I came, it's like people like us, we get so into the health side of it that, we like to just like smash it out the park. So when I got to Oz, I started learning about, this is your fault, right? Started tuning into your stuff and a few other people, got into the organic stuff. Then I was going to the markets, got some great markets here to get organic vegetables. And I was happily paying double the amount. And I was obsessed for like a year, 2 years, organic. Then I kind of went animal-based, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm back at a point now where I eat some vegetables, mainly greens, potatoes. I'll eat some, but there's a very fine line in terms of they just don't agree with my gut a lot of the times. I need to play around with that a bit more. But long story short, like greens, for example. So I found spinach, green beans, and zucchini. But mate, it's like double the price to get organic. So I haven't been going organic. I've been washing them properly and eating them like that. And I've felt fine, but I'm not having loads of them. So that's kind of like been working for me. So you said about organic and non-organic. So talk us through that then now in terms of like, I think for most people it's splitting hairs because most people just don't eat enough vegetables. They don't eat enough whole food, right? So if you're eating loads of ultra-processed foods and you're worried about organic versus non-organic, don't think it's that important, but it depends, doesn't it?
It does. Look, I won't buy it because, they say vote with your dollar, but it's hard when you've got a large family to decide that. I mean, we eat a lot of food, like a lot of food, lots of meat, lots of veg, lots of fruit. I'll gravitate more to fruit that you can peel. Oranges and bananas, great. I mean, there is a protective skin there for all of the pesticides, things like that. Yeah, avocados, exactly right. Everything else gets washed. Do I think that we can wash the pesticides off? Not really. I think it's going to be pretty hard to, try and wash pesticides off broccoli. Like, how's that going to work? It's just not. As you mentioned, I just think that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that you're probably not eating enough vegetables, or the biggest problem is that you're not sleeping well or you're not moving well. It is like that's a windscreen wiper problem when the engine doesn't work. So I would obviously that you can Google. I think they call it the Dirty Dozen or something, which talks about the foods and the fruits and the vegetables that contain or are perhaps exposed to the most toxins. Yes, you could start to avoid some of those. Yes, you could invest in more of like an apple cider vinegar, bicarb soda wash to wash them in, and go for the ones that you can peel more. We peel the potatoes. Like, I will actually peel cucumbers. Like, we peel a lot of veg and then just boil it or throw it into a slow cooker and kind of cook them that way. But I think that it is not the biggest problem that we should be focusing on. It's probably not a problem that we should even be focusing on at all.
100%.
If you're going to afford organic, then, great, more power to you.
Great stuff. Yeah, if you're a millionaire, congratulations, right? Yeah. Seed oils versus... Exactly, my man, exactly. Seed oils versus animal fats then, right? Let's get into that. Best choices for long-term health. Yeah. We know seed oils, there's 8 different types, right? We know they're pro-inflammatory, etc. Talk us through that, what people need to be aware of there and how they can manage that.
Well, I look at, like, we don't know. I mean, there's a huge anti-seed oil movement, and a lot of my thinking around that particular movement is that it makes a lot of sense that we've created this thing, and it seems to have origins in machine lubricant, and it comes from a byproduct that we weren't using. So how can we monetize this? A lot of the seed oils are found mainly in processed and packaged food, so ultra processed convenience food. I'm going to err on the side of caution and say prevention is probably the cure. So I'm going to avoid as much of that as I can and just gravitate over to naturally occurring animal fats that we've been consuming since day dot. it makes sense to me. A little bit like smoking, right? You know, it probably doesn't make sense to breathe in smoke because we need our lungs to breathe fresh air and make us, you know, walk upstairs and live a long, healthy life. I'm just going to err on the side of caution saying there are different camps that say they're actually fine, like they're heart healthy, and there are lots of studies to show that they're heart healthy. Again, follow the money, and you can see that a lot of those studies have been funded by the grain industry and other nefarious organizations. I would personally, out of all of the podcasts that I've recorded over the last 15 years, one of the biggest take homes for me is I just think that I am going to avoid vegetable oils at all costs, and it's worked well for me because I'm enjoying good health. I'll cook. So we cook. We have butter, lard. We have some tallow. We have olive oil. I preference olive oil, and I know that a lot of people don't, but that's just because I personally need to consume more monounsaturated fats and saturated fats. DNA tests showed that I need to do that for brain health because of some polymorphism that says that I don't transport saturated fats efficiently in my body. That's just for me. But I think that the majority of people will do really well in just navigating over to natural fats rather than these industrialized seed oils, which are wrapped in controversy.
100%. And that's a really good point, because I've seen the huge movement now in America, which I think is a massive net positive, by the way, with the new government structure and with the Robert, whatever his name is. What's his name again? The food
RFK.
guy? RFK. But it's never the first port of, having coached so many people to success, right? It's never the first port of call where I go, right, let's have a look at seed oils and let's remove them. I think it's a better message to get across, and actually a bit more simple for people rather than, you know, seed oils are like, they're doubling down on this seed oil thing and making that the number one topic of discussion. Well, I think it goes back to what we were saying. How do you make people aware of ingredients in food, avoiding UPF like the plague, right? Ultra processed foods, and eating more single ingredient foods. Then how do we make it where maybe it's a bit more feasible for people in America? Because, you know, most people haven't got, you know, even $1,000 in their bank to be able to eat these. Like, I feel like just making that, and naturally as you remove ultra processed foods, you remove the seed oils. So I feel like it's kind of like almost just more for attention and a bit of kind of like, you know, look at what we're doing here. I think it's really important, like you say, there's research to show, especially when you cook these seed oils, a lot of them anyway, canola oil in particular, turns into a trans fat, pro-inflammatory. But nothing's going to be more pro-inflammatory than continuously gaining body fat and eating ultra-processed foods, which make you overeat. You know what I mean? It kind of always goes back to the very simple thing, doesn't it? It
really does. Like, if you can consume the majority of your foods and they don't have labels on them, then great, you're onto the right thing, because that's real food. That's that in my mind, I think that is probably the single best thing that we can do to shift our health in the right direction. It's just look at the quality of the foods that you're going to eat. Try and gravitate to whole foods.
Love that, man. And just want to touch on that as well, because it's very interesting, right? How we had the last conversation and you talked about saunas.
Yes.
And I tuned into this podcast and it was amazing. Shout out to Chris Williamson on the Modern Wisdom podcast. I don't know if you heard it. It's a neuroscientist guy or whatever. I can't think what his thing is, but it's all about how neurotoxins build up in the brain. It blew my mind. And it was what you were saying then. Omega-3s, there's loads of research on this now for like, and things like curcumin, which have been studied a lot, which you find in turmeric, like anti-inflammatory properties. But one of the best ways to reduce the neurotoxins that inevitably build up in the brain is saunas, right? So it hammered that one home for me again. But it's very interesting, right? How, you know, the foods that you eat, and people always talk about mental health as well. I don't want to go too far off here, but like mental health is an epidemic, obviously suicide rates going up and everything else. But he was just saying, you know, so many different things he covered and how people live and what they consume. And then I'm going to get into this now just to kind of wrap this up as well in terms of microplastics and heavy metals. But it's brain health, right? And taking care of your brain. That is the most, he reckons his thing was like, you know, it's 70% brain health, because most people's brain is, you know, full up of toxins and lots of other stuff going on there as well. And then about 30% of it is your mind and mental health, right? So it makes sense. Like, for example, you need a physically healthy body to prevent you from getting things like diabetes and chronic illness and, you know, heart failure and stuff. I think it's kind of similar with the brain. You've got to take care of your brain, manage, like you said, you did the DNA test. Mine is coming back soon. Looking forward to that. You did the DNA test and you found that, you know, okay, these fats are going to work better for me. Great. And what you mentioned there, particularly polyunsaturated fats, they're, anti-inflammatory properties. So they're definitely things that you need to be aware of, right? And microplastics and heavy metals. I know you had an episode there, not an episode, you had a moment where you had your tests and you realized you were getting a buildup of heavy metals, right? And then you change your water supply, start having saunas. So talk us through that, microplastic, heavy metals, and environmental toxins, and what you've learned about that.
Yeah, look, I think from a microplastic perspective, that's going to be tricky. I think the whole food system now is obviously, we're covering everything in plastic. We've got plastic wrappings. We heat food in plastic. We consume seafood that consumes plastic. Similarly with even animal products as well. We just need to do the best that we can. And there are a few changes that we can make. We can switch to glass for heating food and storing food. We can get a wooden chopping board over plastic chopping board, and we can try and consume whole foods over processed foods. Outside of that, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to navigate. And it probably is one of those things that, we do as much as we can and we don't worry about it too much because we won't sleep. Heavy metals, again, obviously drinking water, tap water is going to be the best place to start if we consume lots of water. Getting filtration on that, removing fluoride and chlorine and all of the other contaminants can be done by a couple of $100, like an underwater sink filter. I tested for heavy metals and I had a ton of them, like back in the day. That's why I brought the infrared sauna, sat in the infrared sauna probably 5 times a week for 6 months, and then retested, and the heavy metals came down, which was great. So that was a win, but also concentrated on my sleep, because we know that when we access deep restorative sleep, so particularly deep sleep, then the brain has its own cleaning system, which I think they call glymphatic drainage as opposed to lymphatic drainage. And if we can't access deep sleep for any reason, because we're on our devices, or we haven't moved enough during the day, or we've had a really late meal, or we just got a poor sleep pattern, then the brain isn't going to be able to do that. And again, for my particular DNA testing, it says, like, I am susceptible to neurocognitive decline. Like, my parents succumbed to that at an early age. And so I want to do everything that I can to foster a healthy brain. Exercise is huge for that, as you'd know, right? You'd be the biggest proponent on mental health and exercise. So I just look at that. Yes, we can nourish it. Yes, we can detox. I think all of these green juices and celery fasts for brain health and detoxification, I don't really ascribe to that. I think if you do want to actually move heavy metals properly, and you have an issue and you've tested properly, you're probably going to have to go to a more reputable organization and get some big like chelation ingredients involved in doing that mindfully, because moving toxins as well can be quite dangerous. And I interviewed a guy who was from Quicksilver Scientific in the States, which was a really, really well-known detoxification knowledge base. And he was just very mindful of, look, if you want to move metals through your body from your mind and secrete those and try and rid them from your body, you've got to do it in a very mindful process, because you can actually cause yourself more issues than you solve if you just go hell for leather and try and do it on your own. But certainly sauna worked for me in terms of lowering a lot of these strange metals that I had in my body. And the naturopath at the time was pretty sure that a number of those came from drinking water, because there were some real curveballs in there in terms of some funny metals that you wouldn't have expected. But certainly I think just whole foods, drinking water, exercise, sweat, and good sleep. And if you really got some struggles with heavy metals that you can't move, then I would go to an organization who was well versed in allowing you to access the medication that actually moves the needle, as opposed to trying some kind of quackery cleanse diet, which I really just don't think works.
Hey man, you hit the nail on the head in terms of how you can be terrified of these things though, right? Yeah. I was chatting to this older guy, he was in his 60s in the sauna, right? The other week, funny enough, right? Back on the saunas. I was chatting to him, and the average person has got the equivalents to like a plastic spoon amount of microplastics in their brain, right? And the look on his face, right? I'll never forget it. And then he goes every Saturday. So I went this Saturday, and he was in there with this other young lad, right? And he was just coming out, and I went in there, and he went, I was just telling him about the microplastic thing you told me in the brain, man. He was still terrified like a few weeks later. But also it's like the average guy has got about that much, like a small coin amount in their balls as well. And look, yeah, I'm trying to scare you, right? But the bottom line is all you can do, right, is just be aware of these things, and then how can I combat it? And nothing's going to be all the stuff that we talk about. You always say this, and you said just on your main page on Ancestral as well. I love that because it's all nutrition and everything, right?
Yeah.
But you always look at the foundation. Nothing matters without good quality sleep. Forget about everything.
Exactly.
Yeah. So good quality sleep. Yeah, obviously eating right, like we say, eating at least 90% whole foods, eating enough protein so you're getting the right quality, building blocks, and you don't overeat because that blunts your appetite. Movement is key. That's everything, right? Movement is medicine. And then strength training in particular for metabolic health and the main fundamentals. But then, as you say, the saunas as well. And that, the Alzheimer's study as well, it kind of made sense then. Obviously, there's going to be other factors as well. But when it comes to the neurotoxicity of what's going on in the brain, nothing's going to age your brain more than that, right? So it kind of makes sense that probably assists that study where it's like 66% less chance of Alzheimer's, right, from having regular saunas. I think it was like 4-10-minute saunas a week, a finished study.
Yeah, it's not a lot. And even like you mentioned detoxification, like if you're not having a regular bowel movement each day, then I'd start there because that is our primary method of toxin elimination. It's through regular bowel movements, right? Sweat, urine, and regular bowel movements. And so if you've decided that, I'm not going to eat any vegetables, I'm not going to eat any fiber, I'm just going to eat ribeye steaks 3 times a day, and I'm great, I don't even need to go to the toilet, I only go once a week. Well, I'd question that.
I love that. Well, they're like, but I'm not eating fiber, so once a week, there's nothing there. Oh my God, it's empty.
Yeah,
love it, man. Yeah. Hey, all right, man. I really appreciate that, mate. This was a great chat once again, and let's do this more often, just for the audience. We're going to plan on doing this, more frequently because, I enjoy talking to you. I know the audience get a ton of value from your knowledge and insights. Give us more of just to remind the audience. I'll put it in the show notes. Where can we find you? Ancestral Nutrition, etc.
Yeah, look, absolutely. So all of the podcast stuff will be thehealthsessions.com.au. So it's the website, and the back catalogue there is, you can search for anything, and there's some great conversations, lots to be learned. Typically, day-to-day stuff will be found on Ancestral Nutrition's Instagram page, which is ancestral_nutrition. We do lots of stories, and we've got lots of resourcey stuff going on there. We're doing webinars at the moment, which is a lot of fun because you get to speak to people and understand their issues and their struggles. But that's kind of where we are at the moment.
That's awesome, man. I'll add that into the show notes. And just one more thing for the audience as well. I'm actually giving away a handful more free metabolic assessments this month. It basically gives you a metabolic score, and then it gives you a roadmap in terms of exactly what you need to do for your metabolic type, and whether it's building muscle, losing fat, or both, and how to optimize your metabolic health. So this is free. Again, the link is going to be in the show notes, and all the links, what we talked about, are in the show notes. So, mate, great to catch up, man.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to download that metabolic guide myself. I'm doing it.
Sorry, man, I lost you a bit there. Say that again.
I just said I'm going to download your metabolic guide myself. I want to check
Let's do it, my man. Let's do it, my man. You really need it, mate. You're out of shape at the moment. You know what I mean? You need to start prioritizing your health.
I'll try.
All right. Cheers, mate.
Thank you, mate.
Thanks, man.